Hi, everyone. It's Deacon Greg with another installment in the confirmation series of teachings. And this particular session is beginning to look at commandments 4 through 10, or what your chapters in your textbook call love of neighbor. In a separate session, we looked at commandments 1, 2, and 3, which determine our love for God and govern our relationship with God. Now we're going to look at commandments 4 through 10, our love of neighbor, and how we are to act in relationships that we find ourselves in. In this particular session, we're going to look at commandments 4 and 5, and in the next session, we'll look at 6 through 10. Commandment number 4, the very first of the commandments about our relationships with others, goes like this: honor your mother and father. And certainly, this is challenging for anyone at any age. However, I think deep down in our hearts, we know that we should honor the people that brought us into the world. So, we are supposed to respect, love, honor, and obey our parents. As you're getting older now, hopefully your relationship with your parents is different than it used to be. Hopefully, back in those early days, you obeyed your parents out of fear. Maybe fear of punishment, maybe fear of disappointing or offending them. Maybe you listened and obeyed your parents because you were afraid of what would happen if you didn't. But now I hope that you're getting older and you realize that it's really not a relationship of fear. Rather, it should be a relationship of love and mutual respect. These people brought us into the world. They are our parents, they are our authority, and we deserve to honor them as children, as teenagers, as adults, and especially when they get older towards the end of their lives. So I hope that your relationship with your parents has matured. I hope that you see them as hardworking people that want the best for you and really try their best to provide for everything you could ever want or need in this world. So, whether they're the best parents in the world or not so great, they're still our parents, and we deserve to love, honor, respect, and obey them at every situation of our lives. That brings us to commandment number 5 that we'll focus most of our time and energy on today. That commandment is, thou shalt not kill. And you might think that this would be the commandment that would require the least amount of discussion, and yet it requires the most. Yes, we're not supposed to take anyone's life. Yes, we're supposed to be people that are nonviolent, if possible. Yes, we are supposed to make sure that we're not wounding anybody physically, spiritually, psychologically. We're not supposed to bully or cyberbully or anything like that. That's the obvious meaning of the fifth commandment. But there is another meaning of the fifth commandment, no less important. And this fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill, in our modern Catholic Christian religion, also tells us that we must respect life in all of its forms from the moment of conception until the moment of natural death. So, just like we're not supposed to take life away, we're supposed to respect it, promote it, and defend it in all cases from the moment of conception until the moment of natural death. This plays out in 3 huge issues that I'd like to speak with you about today: abortion, the death penalty, and physician assisted suicide. So let's look at each of these issues. Each of these issues is hotly debated in our society today, and you'll definitely hear varying opinions about these particular things. The first one I'd like to go over with you is the topic of abortion. Abortion was legalized in the United States on January 22nd, 1973. So we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of the legalization of abortion. And abortion is a process whereby a woman who is pregnant terminates her pregnancy and destroys the baby that is within her womb. Now, I will not describe that process for you. If you and your parents want to watch videos or see images, there are plenty of them on the internet about how an abortion takes place. There are two types of abortion: a regular conventional abortion and something called a partial birth abortion. And you should do some research and find out about these things if your parents believe that it is appropriate for you to do so. I'll just say this: abortion is a rather brutal, barbaric procedure where a woman who was pregnant is no longer pregnant, and what used to be a baby is disposed of in pieces. I'll leave it at that, and if you want to do further research, please feel free to do so. So, abortion. The central question of abortion is, when does life begin? If life begins at birth, when we take our first breath outside of our mother's womb, then abortion is nothing more than a medical procedure. But if life begins at conception, at fertilization, at the moment that the sperm and the egg meet and become a fertilized egg, a zygote, then abortion is nothing less than murder. And the Catholic Church believes that life does, in fact, begin at the moment of conception. Why? Because all of the unique traits of this unique human being are set at the moment of conception. And only 21 days after conception has taken place, there is a measurable heartbeat. Only a few weeks after that, there are measurable brain waves. Certainly, if I asked you if something was alive and that something has a heartbeat and brain waves, I think most of you would say yes, that entity, that something or someone is in fact alive. So the church gets its idea that life begins at the moment of conception from, in fact, science, from this idea that all of a unique human being's traits are formed in the moment of conception, that there is a measurable heartbeat only 3 weeks after conception takes place, before a woman even knows that she's pregnant. There are brain waves soon thereafter. So every abortion that's ever been performed stops a beating heart. It stops the brain waves that are running through that new human being's body. And we in the Catholic Church can say with great authority that that equals murder. Many people say, well, what about special cases? Shouldn't abortion be legal and permissible in certain situations? And the ones that often get referred to me is, first of all, what about if the woman is raped? Shouldn't she be able to have an abortion and terminate the pregnancy if the child was conceived under terrible, violent circumstances and the child is unwanted? And certainly, rape is a traumatic and terrible event in the life of that woman. And we know that rape causes post-traumatic stress disorder. But we also know that abortion causes post-traumatic stress disorder. And we hear many stories of women after having an abortion having symptoms of PTSD and having nightmares and going through a time of great suffering in their lives. If a woman has the courage to admit that even though the baby was conceived under terrible circumstances, that there is still life there, and if that woman has the courage to give up that baby for adoption, to bear that child, to bring that child into the world, and let that child celebrate life with another family, well, then at least she knows that out of something terrible, the rape, something good happened. A new human being was created, a life can be lived, and hopefully, under the care of different parents, that life can be a productive and wonderful life. What about if there are severe medical consequences and issues with the baby or the mother? In these circumstances, it's very difficult for the woman and her husband, if they're married, to make the decision to either have the child or to be tempted to have an abortion. Certainly, there are tests that a pregnant woman may go under to determine if the baby will have Down syndrome, if the baby will have other genetic disorders. And think of it for a moment. If that couple finds out that they have a special needs child, and if that couple decides to abort that child, aren't they, in a sense, playing God and determining that that child is not normal enough to live a quality of life? I don't know if you would feel comfortable playing God and determining who lives and who dies and how normal one has to be able to live, but I certainly would never be able to make that kind of determination and have that kind of arrogance to play God that way. I know many people who have special needs children, and I marvel at the amount of time, love, and effort these people put out each and every day to care for their special needs child. I think it's a compliment when God bestows a special needs child on a family, on a husband and a wife. Why? Because God always takes care of us, and they say that God never gives you a cross so heavy that you can't carry it. Any special needs parents must be pretty good people and pretty special parents to be able to endure and be able to bring that child up in a loving way. So, any parents of special needs children, I think God is paying you a huge compliment and telling you you have what it takes, and God is entrusting that special soul to your care. So, the church is against abortion in all circumstances. Why? Because there's life there, and that life deserves the same respect, the same fairness, and the same right to live as any of us who are already out of the womb and trying to live our own lives. One last thing on abortion, and that is the argument you often hear from people who want abortion to stay legal is that no individual, no government, or no religion has the right to tell a woman what she can do and not do with her own body. The Catholic response to that is very simple and very clear. It is true that no one or no organization should have the right to tell a woman what she can and cannot do with her own body. But scientifically speaking, that unborn child in that woman's womb is not her own body. Why, you might say? Well, it's very simple. The DNA of the woman and the DNA of her unborn child are different. Half of the genetic information in that unborn child comes from the father of that child. So if you put the DNA of the mother and the DNA of the child next to each other, they are not the same. They're different. The baby might even have a different blood type. So if you're in an argument with someone about abortion and someone brings up that argument, no one has the right to tell a woman what she can and cannot do with her own body. Simply respond that, yes, that's true, but the baby inside the mother depends on the mother for life, for nourishment, for oxygen, and for everything that that child needs to grow into a fully developed human being. But it's not the same as the mother. He or she is his or her own distinct individual who deserves the same respect and the same right to life as any one of us. So that is abortion, and the church doesn't allow any exceptions because we believe there's human life and life deserves to be respected. The next issue I'd like to go over with you is the death penalty. And this is really an issue about whether or not, if a person's been convicted of murder, it's okay to punish that convicted murderer by murdering that person. And there are many states where the death penalty is legal and where it's used. There are some states that don't have the death penalty here in the United States, and Rhode Island is one of them because of the person that you're seeing on the screen right now. And I'll tell you his story in just a moment. But the death penalty has other flaws. Number one, you're saying that you want to kill a person to show a person that killing a person is wrong. So it's really the height of being a hypocrite to do the very same thing to the person that you're not happy that the person did to someone else. Are you any better than the convicted murderer if you're killing the murderer? So there's a hypocrisy there. Also, from a religious standpoint, we believe that God is the author of life and death, and that no one has the authority, the right to determine who lives and who dies and when, except God and God Himself. And then we get to the practical or real world reason that Catholics oppose the death penalty. And that is because sometimes the legal system is wrong. And when you execute someone under the punishment of the death penalty, you can never take that punishment back. It's a final, permanent solution. And if the person's found to be innocent, nothing can be done to bring that person back to life. And certainly, I think most of us would say, no, the legal system's not perfect and it doesn't always get the right person. And even if one person is killed by mistake, that's one person too many. And we as good Catholics, respecting life and the right to life, would never be able to support that. The person you're looking at on the screen was a man by the name of John Gordon. And his story, the true story of John Gordon, is the reason why Rhode Island got rid of the death penalty in the mid-1800s, and it's never returned since. Many of you who live in the Cranston area may know of a place called the Governor Sprague Mansion at the corner of Cranston Street and Dyer or Pecasset Avenue. The Governor Sprague Mansion in the mid-1800s was owned by the Sprague family, one of the most wealthy and powerfully connected families in the whole state of Rhode Island. The area around the Sprague Mansion was the Sprague Plantation, a working farm and everything that associates with it. One day, as one of the Sprague children, Amasa Sprague, was walking through the Sprague Plantation, and as a matter of fact, it was New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1843, Amasa Sprague was killed right there on the Sprague Plantation property. And when it was discovered that Amasa was murdered, the police wanted to find the killer quickly and do justice swiftly because it was such a high-profile family. They settled on three brothers, the brothers Gordon. And they thought they had a reason why the Gordons would want to kill one of the Sprague children. The story goes that the Gordons were Irish and the Spragues were Scottish. And there was a feud between those people at that time. And also, the Gordons owned a restaurant and bar near the Sprague Plantation. And because too many of the Sprague's plantation workers were getting drunk during the day at lunch, the Spragues used their political influence to get the Gordons' liquor license removed from their restaurant. And if you know anything about the restaurant business, the money is in beverages and especially alcoholic beverages. Everyone assumed it had to be one of the Gordon brothers doing a revenge act against the Spragues, so they killed Amasa Sprague. They gathered up the brothers, they settled on one brother, John Gordon, whose picture is right there, and they did a quick trial. They convicted John Gordon of the murder of Amasa Sprague, and on Valentine's Day of 1845, where the Dunkin' Donuts Center now stands, they had a public hanging of John Gordon. A few days later, with more evidence and further investigation, they came to the conclusion that John Gordon was completely innocent and could not have possibly committed that crime. So the last major execution in the state of Rhode Island was a faulty execution, and they had the wrong person. So there are religious, philosophical, and practical reasons why the death penalty is all wrong, and any confirmed Catholic cannot, in good conscience, support the death penalty. Finally, we're going to look at one other issue, and that is an issue called physician-assisted suicide. Physician-assisted suicide is gaining a lot of momentum in the United States of America today. And as you can see, the states outlined in yellow in the Pacific Northwest and California, the right to die or the right to have a physician help you to commit suicide is legal. And then there are several other states outlined in the green and the blue where physician-assisted suicide is being debated, talked about, and legislation may be coming forth where you might be able to die. So the idea here is that if you have a terminal illness, if you just don't want to live anymore, shouldn't you have the right to determine your own date of death? And the church says no. God is the author of life and death, and in humility, we should never presume that anyone has the right to die. Everyone should seek life as a precious gift and try to live his or her human life to the best of their ability until God determines that person's date of death. Today, most states where it is legal, it's as simple as getting a prescription for a bunch of pills that you take in combination with each other with a big glass of water, and then you fall asleep and never wake up again. So this is becoming attractive to a lot of people, but the church says no. Respect the idea that you don't determine your own date of birth. You should not think in arrogance that you have the ability to determine your own date of death. There is one exception to this, not an exception, but a different circumstance. And that is if a person is in a persistent vegetative state. It's nicknamed PVS, persistent vegetative state. And the person is technically dead, they're brain dead, but they're being kept alive, their body's being kept alive by an artificial respirator, in some cases a feeding tube, and in some cases an IV for hydration. In this particular situation, when there's a persistent vegetative state, when the brain is dead and there's no hope of recovery of any brain function whatsoever, the church says that the family of that person can decide to either use extraordinary means of keeping that person alive. That would be things like the artificial respirator, the feeding tube, the IV, or to choose not to use extraordinary means of keeping that person alive. So the church believes that ordinarily you always have to use the basic things to keep a person alive and well: food, water, shelter, clothing, and medicine. But only when there is a persistent vegetative state, then you can decide, and the family member, if he or she has a living will that they've made when they were well, can decide if he or she wants extraordinary means of keeping that person to be alive to be done or not to be done. So let's sum this all up. We like to say that in the Catholic Church, we respect life from womb to tomb, from the moment of conception until the moment of natural death. We like to say that from the moment of conception until the moment that God calls that person to himself in natural death, no human being should do anything to get in the way of the process of life that God has blessed that person with. A confirmed Catholic believes in the teachings of the church. A confirmed Catholic should not support abortion in any circumstances. A confirmed Catholic should not support the death penalty in any circumstances. A confirmed Catholic should not support physician-assisted suicide in any circumstances. These are tough and complex issues, and some of you may have questions about the church's teaching that goes beyond the explanation in this short video. If you do, please contact me. Please contact your pastor, your youth minister, your director of religious education, and we'll try to help you to understand why this is such an important teaching of the church and why it's so important to follow. For today's session, here are the reflection questions that I would like you to think about and compose a paragraph about. Number one, why should we honor our parents? What's so special about them, and why do we have an obligation to honor and respect them? Number two, why is the church against abortion in all cases with no exceptions? Why can't there be exceptions in extreme cases? Number three, why is the church against the death penalty? There are several correct answers to this one. And then number four, why is the church against physician-assisted suicide? Why can't the person have a right to die and decide that they've lived long enough? So those are the questions for this session's wrap up. I wish you God's blessing. I hope you and your families are staying safe, and I'll see you again for another session soon. God bless you all.